overall big picture for the entire spring. Where are you, Jimmy Himes, with the offense at this point?
When I watch a spring game, I don't look at a lot of things other than the talent. Who can play, who can make plays. And so I came away impressed with a couple of Tennessee's newcomers at receiver. I like Chris Brazel, the transfer from Tulane. He caught 44 passes at Tulane. He's got really good speed. He can catch a deep ball. He's 6'6". He's got really good size. I like the 5-star Mike Matthews that came from Georgia. Not only did he catch a touchdown pass, but on a flanker screen, he was the lead block that sprang the player that got the touchdown. So I like what I saw out of those two, and I was kind of I was attentive to Josh Heupel saying that this is the most depth we've had in the wide receiver room. And I think one reason is those two. So I like what I saw out of them. The offensive line is still a work in progress, and that defensive line is pretty good anyway, so you knew they weren't going to run much.
And you had some guys that they didn't even put out there.
Yeah, that's right. So Dylan Sampson didn't have a carry. Yeah. So, but the thing I took away, I liked the two new receivers a lot. I thought the quarterbacks did well. And I was really impressed with Merklinger's mobility. Yeah. He's got some wheels on him, which you need to run this offense.
My only concern, well, not my only concern, but one of my biggest concerns is that fact right there. Who's your backup quarterback? Should something happen with Nico? I mean, we saw it happen two years. We saw Milton get hurt. Hendon Hooker took over. We saw Hooker get hurt. We saw Milton take over. Is Gaston Moore, he's a veteran. He knows the offense. Clearly, they keep him around. He's followed Josh Heupel. He's like a coach on the field out there. Does he have the talent level to get by if something happens to Nico? Is Merklinger, does the talent outweigh the inexperience if they need to put him there? I do wonder about the backup quarterback position. But in the transfer portal world, I think I would probably say that for every team in the SEC right now. Right. So that would be a concern. Your thoughts on the offense right now?
Yeah, I think I agree a lot with what Jimmy said. What you were looking for is who pops, right? Who shows up, who do you see? It's easier to see that on offense. And so seeing those two wide receivers, Brazel and Matthews, that was a really good thing to see. I also noticed Merklinger's legs, being able to see that. But there were a couple plays in there that even they let the guys run, you could tell that, okay, full speed, that guy gets tackled right there. He gets hit. So the officials weren't necessarily short whistling it either at times when you could have got a guy. So overall, you really looked at it and you said the offensive line was your big concern, which, that has been your big concern. It's still a concern going into this season of what happens with an injury at a certain spot. Center's one of those spots. What happens if you lose your guy there? You have to be concerned about that still to this day. With this Josh Heupel offense, I think it is. Last year was a little bit back. I think you're going to see a step forward with it this year. Yeah. But it still comes down to, as we've talked about on this show lots of times, the running game is so much more important. And if that offensive line's not there to do that, you don't have the horses back there to do that. You didn't see that yesterday, so that's what you're still looking for to find out coming forward.
Vince, part of that was on the offensive line. You were also getting a look at young running backs, and there's a lot of questions right now as to whether or not, with the Cam Selden injury and when he'll be back in the fall, at what point of the fall will he be back? There are a lot of questions as to whether or not Tennessee should go out and grab a running back in the portal. So I'll let you talk about your thoughts on the offense, but if you don't mind, hit a little bit on your thoughts on the running back and that specifically, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. The offensive line, there's guys missing, so it's hard to fully evaluate the whole running game and the offensive line because you don't have all those pieces together. Dylan Sampson is healthy in camp, had good camp, but they didn't play him. So you're really not getting a fair evaluation. I'm with you guys. You got to look at the individual players and then afterwards sort of piece it all together based on the info. I thought Khalifa Keith and Deshaun Bishop both had some hard runs where they broke some tackles. They weren't explosive. You want to see that explosiveness from that position. I think Sampson can bring that to you. But I don't think it's good enough for them to not address it in the portal. And I think Damian Martinez from Oregon State is and should be one of their biggest targets. He's going to be one of the top players in the portal overall. Yeah, he's an All-American running back.
It's going to cost you.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll see if Dramod McCoy, the corner from Oregon State, can help you out with that. And maybe, I don't know what kind of relationship he has with him, but maybe help tell him how good it is here on campus if the football part of it is big. But that would be huge for this offense.
If you bring in a running back that good and you spend that much money on him, is that an issue with Dylan Sampson? And is Dylan Sampson sitting there right now saying, I need all the carries? Or would he be happy to bring somebody else in who's going to get a chunk of carries? I think that's a question.
It's a fair question. It depends on what they feel about the other two guys, because last year they really used three guys, and maybe they focus on two, and then there's enough work there. Plus, in the passing game, they can use them.
I don't think Heupel focuses on one running back in his career. As good as Wright was, he averaged less than 11 carries a game, right? So, I think he does look for that depth. But to your point, I don't think Sampson's as worried about the carries as he is the cash.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring in
somebody else
and pay him a lot of money, he's going to say, okay, where's mine?
Is that a deterrent? The fact that he doesn't have one lead guy, is that a deterrent for Martinez until he really hasn't had big running back in the portal? Or is that a positive because in the NFL they don't want a lot of tread on the tires? So maybe he looks at it as a positive.
You could look at it both ways. One, there's not a lot of tread on my tires. Two, I didn't get a chance to really show that I can be the workhorse guy.
He does
So
have
it
a lot
works
of tape
both
from
ways.
Oregon State. That's pretty good too.
At the end of the day, a guy like that transfer, though, it's going to be down to what's the money.
Right.
Right. Is it matched or is it not? And that's where he's going to go. That's why he's leaving where he's leaving. He's coming to get more money, and that it's free agency for
Which
him.
then gets you back to Jimmy's point, and that is if you bring somebody else in and give them more money than the money you're already giving to Dylan Sampson, if that's the case, what friction does that create in the locker room?
It's a hard walk. You're going to have conversations.
The
to figure that out.
confidence too, because they're being left out from the Pac-12. So the level of competition that he could prove himself in the SEC or somewhere else is different.
One thing that stood out to me yesterday, and we talked about it on this show last year, was there were a lot of times last year when we said, this coaching staff doesn't seem to trust Joe Milton to throw the ball over the middle of the field. Yesterday was a scrimmage, but the ball was going over the middle of the field yesterday. And I, as Will said, I have a feeling last year we're going to look back and say, oh, that was the glitch. That was the hiccup. And chunk of it was the processing speed of Joe Milton and the accuracy issues. Part of it was the receivers let him down at times. But I think we're going to move past that this year, and it's going to look more like last year, if you look through Josh Heupel's career, it was the outlier. Everything else has been rather steady between these two markers. It's been here's your high, here's your low, and last year was here. Looking at that yesterday, seeing what we saw in the bowl game back in Orlando, I think that the passing game will get back to looking more like it did the first few years as opposed to what we saw last year.
Watch this stat. They will have an increase incredibly in yards after catch because Nico's going to be a much more accurate passer. He's going to hit them on the run, hit them in stride, and it's not going to be a 98-mile-an-hour bullet coming at you where, I caught it, and it knocked you down.
Or you're catching it back on your hip as opposed to out in front. Yeah.
So watch for that. I think that's going to be an important stat for this team.
Agreed. Anything? What's your confidence? Let me do this. 1 to 10. That's your scale. What's your confidence level in the offense coming out of spring?
As it sits right now, I'd say in the 8-9 range. I think it's really good.
Okay, 8-9. Where are you going?
8.
8.
8.
Okay, I was going to go 7, but we'll see. Because
You're so negative.
I am negative. I want to see Nico against SEC competition over the course of the season.
I just think
against Iowa.
Heupel system after last year, it's going to take a step up. I just think that based on his consistency throughout the years and what you see in the quarterback, I think you're going to have better years.
I thought last year was like a 5, so I'm giving it 2 steps up. All right.